Good afternoon. Why don't we get settled in and get started on a great workshop. Welcome, I'm Mark Ahlstrom, and as president of the board of directors for the Energy Systems Integration Group, it's my honor to welcome you to the 2025 Fall Technical Workshop. I think you'll agree that these are interesting times. Most of us here are technically oriented folks who love to help solve problems. But clearly, we need a lot of collaboration, creativity, engineering, and execution in these times. I find ESIG to be my community and my best source of support for the important work that we all do to help society. And even if this is your first ESIG workshop, I believe that you will end up feeling that way too. So why is ESIG so unique and important? ESIG convenes key participants to chart the technical pathways in a way that is collaborative, reliable, economic, trusted, and sustainable. As you'll see this week, by bringing talented and dedicated technical people like you together at the right time to talk about the right things, ESIG functions as a catalyst to make progress faster and better. You'll also notice that speakers and attendees come from many areas of expertise and from organizations across North America and around the world, because that's what it takes to transform complex energy systems. Grid operators, utilities, equipment manufacturers, power plant developers, researchers, planners, consultants, modelers, software and AI companies, NGOs, and industry associations are all here as a safe place and a productive place to share and learn and collaborate on solutions. As a global member-based nonprofit organization for those of us supporting the technical aspects of grid transformation and energy systems integration, ESIG works through workshops, tutorials, webinars, blogs, working groups, and task forces. The widely respected and influential reports from our task forces address today's energy system challenges for both technical experts and decision makers. If your organization is a member, I deeply thank you. If you're not yet a member of ESIG, I hope that you will join. The modest annual membership fee is based on the annual budget of your organization and provides membership benefits to your entire staff. Independent consultants and individuals can also join, and ESIG provides free memberships to students of accredited educational organizations. Membership allows you to participate in the ESIG working groups and task forces, including the Large Loads Task Force that will meet here on Thursday, as well as reduced meeting registration rates and other member benefits. Most importantly, your memberships and contributions directly support the ESIG mission. And this week, let's all make a special effort to engage the students and young professionals who are here. They are vital to our future. If you're a student or a young professional of any sort, I invite you to join us tomorrow evening at 5:30 p.m. before the full workshop reception begins at 6:30, so you can meet with me, Professor Ben Hobbs, ESIG staff, and others who want to talk to you and meet you. For the workshop this week, I very much want to thank our workshop sponsors, Analytics, WEG, Reactive Technologies, NCORD, Opal RT Technologies, and Power Intel, and recognize NextEra Energy, Meta, and Polaris System Optimization as sustaining members of ESIG for this year. And for all of you, my hope is that you find this ESIG workshop to be a safe place where you can open your minds, think creatively, ask questions without fear, and speculate wildly with the friends you know and the new friends that you meet. It's important, it's fun, and that's why we're all here. Now for the keynote speaker. Jason Connell is VP of Planning for the PJM Interconnection and the perfect speaker to set the stage for our workshop this week. Jason has worked at PJM for over 13 years in various roles in system planning. On his road toward becoming the VP of planning, he was director of essentially every planning and modeling responsibility, including transmission planning, resource adequacy planning, and interconnection planning. Prior to joining PJM, Jason had a career in transmission and substation engineering at PECO, the energy company founded here in Philadelphia in 1881, that is now the largest combined electric and gas utility in Pennsylvania. He received his electrical engineering degree from Drexel University and an MBA from Villanova University. Please join me in welcoming Jason Connell to kick off our ESIG workshop here this week. Thank you, Jason.
Good afternoon, folks. Mark, thank you, Debbie, Charlie, everyone for being so hospitable and having me here today. Very excited to talk to you here about some of the challenges we're facing as an industry. Mark gave a little bit of my background. I got my degree just about 20 blocks from here at Drexel University, and I took a little bit of a roundabout way of getting to where I am now. You never know quite where life is going to take you. I started in the computer industry, actually doing printed circuit board design many, many years ago when I came out of school. Knew computer hardware very well, and that was the gateway that I got into the power industry at Pico Energy and transmission substations as a relay protection and control engineer. When I came to PJM 13 years ago, I started in project management in interconnection planning, and went back and forth between there and the system planning modeling group. They pulled me back into interconnections again, and then they pushed me back over to the transmission planning side. And suddenly I found myself here. So when I introduce myself, I get one of two responses, as I've been in this job for about 10 months. The first is, that I get is congratulations or condolences. I'm not sure which. And the second one I get is, there's a lot of jobs that I wouldn't want to take, but yours is at the top of my list. So I've learned to kind of take that in stride as much as I can. And it's kind of led me here today to talk to you about what's going on in PJM and the industry in general. So first of all, what is PJM and what are we responsible for here, right? So PJM is a regional transmission organization. Many of you might be aware of this. We have three main functions. We operate the wholesale market, right, for energy and capacity and ancillary services. We run the operations of the transmission system, including dispatch of generation, controlling transmission constraints, and the supply-demand balance. And then we also do all of the regional planning for the area, which is my area that we're responsible for. So we will take all of the forecasted gen through our interconnection queue, all of the forecasted load that we have that come through our EDCs and transmission owners, and then make sure that we are building all of the appropriate transmission needed to enable that generation to load path. That's been our bailiwick here in planning and throughout the entire RTO. But the number one job that we have is obviously keeping the lights on by keeping that balance moving. So just a little bit of perspective around the nation, and many of you are probably familiar with this. We're one of 9 regional transmission organizations, along with our sister organizations in the Eastern Interconnection, SPP, MISO, ISO New England, and also New York. In fact, we just met last week to discuss best practices across the entirety of the country. And then we have the Western Interconnection, which includes Cal ISO. And then there's also the North in Canada and IESO and AESO. So all RTOs now serve about 2/3 of the US load and population across the United States. A little bit more on PJM itself and kind of our scope. So we serve over 1,100 member companies, and we coordinate electricity across 13 states in the District of Columbia that serves 67 million people across our footprint. We monitor and coordinate over 1,400 generation facilities and 88,000 miles of high voltage transmission. So we cover all of the major metropolitan areas, including Philadelphia, obviously where we are today, all the way west to Chicago, also Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Columbus, et cetera, across our footprint, quite a bit of load centers. So this is some of the evolution of PJM and where we've come from. So we began as a power pool back in 1927. In fact, the initials PJM stand for the original 3 members of the power pool, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland, which consisted of the MAC companies, which were the Mid-Atlantic Area Council companies, which was PECO, some of the old GPU energy companies, as well as, the companies in Jersey as well. We started to expand as we went through the years and added several, even since I've been here in 13 years, including Duke, Ohio, Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky Power down in the south. And then our latest integration was in 2018 with the Ohio Valley Electric Cooperative in Ohio. So we've grown quite a bit over the last several years, specifically over the almost 30 years that we've been at RTO. So what do we do and what don't we do? So we direct operation of the transmission system. We dispatch generation in order to ensure that we have that load balance we talked about earlier. We are a profit neutral organization, which means that we always operate with a zero balance sheet, a zero income statement at the end of the year. If we have any surplus, it's returned to our members. We coordinate, obviously, maintenance outages as we go through and work with the TOs to do that. We don't actually own any transmission assets, no generation assets, no transmission assets. We don't function as a publicly traded company. We don't have shareholders or concerns around earnings at all. All of our goals are with an eye towards reliability instead of earnings per share. We do not serve any direct or end-use customers, no retail customers. Wholesale is all we deal with within our jurisdiction. And we have several documents that govern how we work, including the open access transmission tariff, a reliability assurance agreement. There's the consolidated transmission owners agreement, and then also our operating agreement in and amongst our members. If you are looking for ways to have some light reading, please feel free to go to our website under the library. There are thousands and thousands of pages of this document, particularly the open access transmission tariff, which has ballooned from, I think when I started, it was slightly over 1,000 pages to I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 pages now. So if you want to sort of move through that, there's plenty of there to digest. So what are some of the problems that we are dealing with, right? Let's talk about the three legs of the planning stool that we address here. There's the supply, there's the load, and then there's the transmission. So first we'll start with the supply. So our installed capacity is roughly 182 gigawatts, mostly of natural gas combined cycle units and CTs. We had a larger coal fleet at one point in time, but largely a lot of those have deactivated over the years to be replaced with natural gas. We also have a very robust and large nuclear fleet on the footprint. A lot of that consolidated in Illinois, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland area. We've seen a lot more renewables start to come onto the system. We see the capacity value of solar here, but nameplate wise, we have about 13 gigawatts worth of solar. There's 11 gigawatts worth of wind. We have a very small amount of storage on the system as well. So what you're looking at here is NERC's long-term reliability assessment on how they view transmission across the entirety of the United States. And you can see that there is either an elevated or high risk in several regions across the footprint, including PJM. And this assessment, I believe, was done in 2024. Probably will likely get an update as we move through. But you can see we're starting to get into a point where the system is becoming more constrained from a transmission aspect in order to be able to serve this load. And you'll see that also in PJM as well. So why is this happening? If you think about roughly 10 years ago, load growth across the footprint was either flat or declining, right? But in recent history, and you can see these lines representing the load forecast for each year, starting at the bottom for 2021 all the way up through our 2025 forecast. We have seen an increasing load forecast in the neighborhood of over 2% a year, or 5,000 megawatts a year over the next several years versus a flat load growth. In our 2025 load forecast, we've included roughly 32 gigawatts of new large load additions that are expected to be in service between now and 2030. And we're currently looking at our 2026 load forecast. And this year we've received requests that would total up to 60,000 megawatts of additions between now and 2030. So you can see this is going to be a growing immediate problem that is happening. So some of the headlines that we've seen, you've probably seen these in the papers, data center growth, with regards to the AI boom. You've seen some generation and data center pairing that's happening with the restart of the Crane Clean Energy Center, was formerly the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant by Constellation, and some gas-powered power plant renewals at the Homer City area that were previously deactivated. All of this is around that proliferation of data centers in order to support AI, cloud computing, and to a lesser extent, some cryptocurrency farms. So what else is adding to the issue? So in addition to our current supply, we're forecasting quite a bit of supply coming off the system, right, due to deactivations. We've processed several gigawatts worth of these over the past several years, largely driven by state and federal policies to move fossil fuels off of the system, in addition to some economics that have forced some units to deactivate or relocate in some instances. We're projecting about 40 gigawatts of deactivations over the next several years. We've seen some of those economic retirements slow due to capacity prices increasing. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we still are forecasting quite a bit of deactivation due to environmental restrictions in the near future. So as a result of this demand growth and constraining supply, what is happening in our wholesale markets? Not even 2 years ago in the 2024-25 auction, we had a overall clearing price in the base residual auction to procure capacity of $29 a megawatt day. We had ample supply and quite a large reserve margin. As you can see, in the subsequent auctions in 25 and 26, and I'm starting from the right to the left moving here. In 25, 26, that started to tighten quite a bit, and we were getting closer to our reserve margin, and the price reflected that as well, jumping from $29 a megawatt day almost to $270 a megawatt day. And then in the most recent auction we ran in 26 and 27, that has jumped up even further to roughly $330. And that was largely due to us having what we call a price collar in place for that particular auction, in which we cleared at the cap for that collar. Had the collar not been in place, we would have cleared even higher than this due to the constraints that we're having on the system. So you can see some of these things are already starting to show in our markets in terms of the increasing price intended to incentivize new generation to come online and incentivize existing generation that would have normally retired for economic reasons to stay online in order to take advantage of those prices. We want to keep the supply in order to deal with the load problem. So we have problems on the supply side. We have growing demand. We have transmission that's becoming more constrained. So what are we doing about it? So a couple of things to talk about is interconnection process reform. So how do we bring more supply onto the system as quickly as possible? Back in 2021, 2022, we recognized that our old interconnection process, which was a first come, first serve process, was inefficient to deal with the volume of renewables that we were receiving. In that time frame, we were getting upwards of 1,000 to 1,300 interconnection requests a year for new generation. So we embarked on a stakeholder process to revise this first come, first served paradigm into a first ready, first served cluster study process. A lot of our sister organizations had already moved to this in prior years, and we took some of the best things that they had done and added our own spin to it and went through the stakeholder process, received high consensus back in 2022 to move forward with that. And when FERC accepted that filing at the end of 2022, November 2022, we kicked off the whole transition in July of 2023, and we've been working our way through since then, meeting our deadlines as we've gone through. We had a backlog of about 200 gigawatts worth of requests that we've been working our way through. and we're down to the remaining 63 gigawatts that are left to be processed. This was a huge effort, not only by my staff, but by the stakeholders in coordination with each other, agreeing on what is a very contentious process in order to get a large amount of consensus to move forward. And that was a large part getting the help to get FERC to approve the process as well. So what has that yielded, right? So we talked about processing of the backlog. We've been timely meeting all of our milestones in the new process as we've gone through what we call the expedited process that concluded last April. Transition cycle 1, which is some of the legacy projects that we moved into the cluster study process. Their final decision point was actually early last week, and we're moving forward with agreements for those. And then we're also keeping the other transition cycle 2 on time. Their results will be available at the end of this week for the first phase. And we will be accepting new applications and processing them in April of next year. So we've been able to take the volume that we were dealing with. We sorted projects, got the ones that were ready to move through as quickly as we could. And then we're working through the remaining backlog and keeping our commitments to those timelines that we outlined in our filing. That's resulted in 46 gigawatts of generation that have executed agreements across our footprint through the process. Once this transition cycle 1 concludes at the end of this year, we expect to have somewhere in the neighborhood of the high 50s of those actually execute agreements. And those projects are ready to construct and put megawatts onto our system. We've moved a lot of solar through. We talked a little bit about that, 13 gigawatts. And then we still have the remainder of transition cycle 2 to process, which will conclude towards the end of next year. So how does that 46 gigawatts that's ready to build, how does that break up or break down across our footprint? And you can see there's several states that are a little bit heavier with new projects than others, Ohio in particular, Virginia and Pennsylvania. And the vast majority of all of these generators with signed agreements are solar, or other renewables with hybrids and also wind and storage. There is a small amount of natural gas that's in development, roughly 6 gigawatts. I think that's declined just a little bit. But you can see across our footprint, we have quite a bit of generation moving. Now, it's interesting when we think about what's happening with the projects in agreement and what's actually coming into service. We've been tracking the amount of projects in agreement since the fall of 22. It was a new stat we were tracking. In the fall of 2022, we had 27 gigawatts worth of signed agreements. We've put roughly 10,000 megawatts in service between then and now, but our number in agreement has continued to grow to 46,000 megawatts. And in fact, this year, we have the slowest pace of new supply coming online across PJM and I just checked it this morning. At the end of October, we're only looking at about 2.1 gigawatts that we've put in service for the entire year, almost all strictly renewables. So you can see we're not keeping pace with new supply coming onto the system with the load growing, even though we have quite a significant amount through the queue. So we tried to accelerate things a little bit more. So last year, we embarked on an initiative called Reliability Resource Initiative, where we allowed that second transition cycle that we were moving through our process to have this injection of projects that were ready to go into that transition cycle, basically accelerating them through the process by a year. And we got quite a big response. We got over 100 applications, 50 of which we selected. That was roughly 9 gigawatts of battery storage and new combined cycles, including uprates to existing facilities. This all got plugged into transition cycle 2, and we're processing this along. So this was an attempt to try and move the needle ahead for new projects that could come online earlier and recognize that the process was an impediment for them to do that. So what else have we done on the interconnection forefront? Oof. We have a partnership with Google Tapestry in order to use their automation skills to automate some of the processes we have in interconnection. Think about a lot of the administrative rote functions that the project managers and the analysis engineers go through, and we're throwing Google's AI capabilities at a lot of that. We're just starting to demo some of those capabilities this quarter, and we probably should have a little bit more to say about it by the end of the year. So far, things are working very well, and we're hoping to just really reduce some of that burden on our staff. Speaking of staffing, we've increased our staffing almost 100% across planning. 5 years ago, when I was here, we were roughly in the 60s or so for staffing, and we've since doubled that capacity, in addition to adding quite a bit of contract staff in order to process interconnections along the way. We've had some other one-off paths that we've taken for interconnections. One, CIR transfers that was initiated by our stakeholders, where we could allow a fast path for generation that's retiring to reclaim their rights and move forward quicker outside of the normal process. And then we've also modified our surplus interconnection service process in order to open that up a little bit wider to folks who can come in and add facilities onto existing generation. So what else is happening in terms of large load growth on PJM, and how is it impacting us? Obviously, we talked about supply, is being constrained, which is reducing our reserve margins and having an impact on some of the prices you're seeing in the capacity market. We want to support, the load coming online, especially data centers, because of the economic benefits to that, to our states and members. It creates new challenges from this standpoint of the technical. How do we integrate large loads? How do they adapt in our system? What type of models do we need to make sure we're ensuring system stability? Are there other technical requirements like low voltage ride-through, et cetera, that we should be putting on large loads? In fact, I was part of a FERC technical conference last week, actually, that was specifically around this issue and how we're going to address it. So it's got everyone's attention. And then finally, what are we doing in operations? How do we deal with the power swings? Because these facilities can ramp very quickly up and down. And how are the operators going to be able to deal with that? So what we did was we launched a critical issue fast path process in our stakeholder process to deal with the large load additions. And there's a few things that we're taking a look at in that process that kicked off roughly about 6 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. How do we improve the long-term large load forecast? So right now, when data centers want to come in and interconnect to the system, they contact our TOs and EDCs. The EDCs and TOs perform the interconnection studies, and at a certain point in their process, they feed that data center load back to us when we develop our annual load forecast. So what type of framework should we have around that data that we receive? How can we homogenize the data across the footprint and all the various interconnection procedures and contractual arrangements that all our transmission owners and EDCs have? How can we avoid duplication and double counting? If you're familiar with the generation interconnection process, very often developers will put in multiple projects trying to site and figure out where is the best location for them to actually develop. Data centers are likely doing very much the same thing. So how do we reduce that double counting as much as possible? What can we do when the demand comes online in order to make it flexible? Is there something we can do with price responsive demand in our markets? Demand response is also a product. Can we incent the load to be curtailable under certain conditions or reduce? And then finally, what else can we do in gen interconnections, and how can we fast track that? We're looking at a 10-month process that runs in parallel to our revised process to expedite any type of generation that can be in service in 3 years or less that has a state sponsorship associated with it, so that we can keep the process out of the way of getting that generation online and helping us to address the problem. Some other things we're doing from a transmission standpoint with FERC 1920 and long-term planning is trying to map out some of the longer lead transmission items that we need to greenlight now in order to build that backbone transfer capability across our footprint to enable the generation where it's developing to the load centers. If you've been following PJM's process, we've greenlit $13 billion worth of transmission over the last 2 years. largely backbone 765 and 500 kV to move the power from the west to the east and south in order to enable everything. And we're continuing to do that this year with our open window RTEP. We'll expect to see quite a bit of transmission build as well throughout when we conclude our process in 2025. Some key takeaways. We want to keep generation on the system until we have enough replacement to serve the growing load. It is a difficult thing to address because the load is growing faster than we can put supply online. We also want to make sure we're understanding what is getting in the way of generation coming online. A lot of what we hear for new gen is concerns around siting and permitting. There's a fair amount of NIMBYism as well for generation coming online. There's also supply chain constraints. There's financing issues that folks are running into with the ever-changing federal landscape on the investment tax credit and the production tax credit. All of these challenges are things that the developers are dealing with in order to get their projects built. And that's tightening supply on our side. We want to unlock those roadblocks and make sure that we can get new generation on the system. And then we're moving across our ops, markets, and planning functions to try and adapt to the load as it's coming online to make sure that we're ready on this interim timeframe between now and 2030 in order to address this supply constraint that we're running into. So that's a lot of information. I sort of droned on for quite a bit. Very happy to take questions if folks have them. I'll let Mark and Debbie moderate or time keep as we go through. But would love to hear your questions, thoughts, concerns.
Everyone to the Fall Technical Workshop. And I wanted to start by asking, how many people here are here at ESIG for the first time? Or how many people is this your first conference? Oh, that's excellent. That's fantastic. Well, welcome. Special welcome to all of you. So welcome also to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is not my hometown, but I grew up east of here, so it's kind of like home. Philadelphia is famous for the Liberty Bell, and you could visit the Liberty Bell for free, except right now the government shut down, so apparently it's closed. So you can't, but next time you can come and visit it. The legend is that the Liberty Bell cracked the first time they rang it in 1752. Now they did fix it, and they used it for like 100 years before they retired it. But the crack is a reminder that even when things don't go perfectly, they can still make history. And our industry, I think, has been going through a lot of turmoil lately. There's sometimes days I don't know which way is up. Let's just remember progress is not about being flawless. It's about perseverance and moving forward despite the cracks. So I'd like to give a few disclaimers to start. Please note anything you hear this week is the view of the speaker, not of ESIG. I wouldn't go making multi-million-dollar investment based on something you solely heard here. We welcome a broad range of participants, including regulators, policymakers, ask that they excuse themselves if discussions enter topics that could be of ex parte concern. We have antitrust compliance guidelines. Essentially, we're asking that you obey antitrust laws and do not try to restrain competition in general, but especially at an ESIG meeting. And then finally, we have rules. We do not tolerate any discrimination or harassment at ESIG events. We ask that everyone be appropriate and respectful in their interactions. And recall, this is an educational event, so any questions are good questions. No question is a dumb question. So I like to start these by thinking about what's keeping grid operators up at night. And this year, I think probably a lot of us are focused on the most severe blackout in Europe in over 2 decades, when in April, Spain and Portugal disconnected from the rest of Europe and lost power. We also had a blackout in North Macedonia in May and in Chile in February. And an interesting thing is that this Iberian Peninsula blackout, the Macedonia blackout, these were over voltage events, right? We're usually concerned about under voltage events, about voltage collapse. That's what we're usually really worrying about. And what this is really highlighting is the need to study more grid conditions the need to really consider these changing power flows, changing resource mix, and changing grid conditions that may lead to different types of reliability issues. Today, we've got a great opening plenary that's going to do a deep dive into all of this. And then finally, last point, we need to, we keep saying this, obviously, we can't say it enough, that inverter-based resources need to ride through disturbances. So there's been a lot of talk lately in the press and a lot of places about increasing electricity prices. The governor of Indiana was recently pressuring utilities on retail rates. I think some of them had gone up by like 25, 27% year on year. There's concerns about, capacity prices increasing in recent years. I wanted to give a shout out to LBNL and some great work Ryan Weiser did, looking at electricity prices and finding that yes, electricity prices are rising. Yes, they have risen a lot more in most recent years, but it's pretty much in step with inflation if you look on an average nationwide basis. And on an average nationwide basis, residential electricity costs, if you look at that as a percent of people's income or as a percent of what they spend in their household, it's basically at an all-time historical low. But that said, there are states where things are steeper, where price increases have been steeper, like in California, like in the Northeast. And LBNL is also showing that utilities are spending less on generation and more on transmission, and especially more on distribution, even when you account for inflation. And much of this appears to be due to aging infrastructure. We all know about the supply chain issues going on. And then there's other things. We know that we've got wildfires and natural disasters and storms that have also imposed significant costs in some regions. But just to point out, there's some great work to help give some nuances around some of the things that you hear in the media. While we're speaking about news in the US can be pretty depressing. Mark kind of alluded to some of this between the accelerated phase out for solar, wind, electric vehicle tax credits. We've got cancellations of clean energy projects, of transmission loans, of grants for lithium mining. One bright spot is battery storage installations. That's a bright spot, and those are growing. And then other regions around the world have really been ramping up. So globally, we had more renewables generation than coal for the first time in the first half of 2025. And China, they now have over 500 1-megawatt DC fast chargers. Apparently, they can charge a vehicle 250 miles of range in 5 minutes. So it's more than 3 times as fast as our fast chargers. And they installed over 200 gigawatts of solar in the first half of this year. So they now have total solar capacity that's greater than a terawatt. And India also, they installed 30 gigawatts of solar in their first 9 months of this year. And that's about what we installed in 2024 here in the US, and it was a new record for us. So this is a lot. And then there are other things going on, like in Europe, they have a clean industrial deal that's supporting clean manufacturing and putting together an industrial decarbonization bank for this. Over here on the right, you can see this is China's electric vehicle medium and heavy duty trucks. So these are electric trucks in red. And then you can see a little bit in the turquoise, which is Europe, and the US is in there, but you can hardly see anything. China's really dominating that market. And this is part of why ESIG is going to be launching an international initiative. We want to have more cross-learning and linkages to peers globally. So we've been trying to do a lot of linkages with Europe. We'd like to try and do more linkages with other parts of the world as well, because there is a lot to learn from these accomplishments, and there's a lot of great lessons learned that we can all share together. For those of you who don't know about ESIG's work, I just wanted to let you know, kind of regarding all the discussion about large loads and data centers that Jason mentioned. Our large loads task force is underway. If you're a member, you can be part of this. We've got a large number of project teams shown here on the left, and got a whole webinar series, and we're going to have a large load workshop on Thursday, as Mark mentioned earlier. So if you are interested in joining us for that, please go see Lacey at the front desk. I also wanted to call your attention, in case you aren't aware, we're doing a number of trainings. So we are doing an interconnection studies 3-day short course in Florida in November, and an EMT training 3 days in December. And anyone is invited. If you have new engineers, say, at your organization that you're training and, say how to do an interconnection study, and you want to help build their judgment and get a jump start on building their judgment and learning from folks who have been doing this for a long time and have a lot of experience, send them over to that short course. The EMT training course is also going to follow that with a lot of kind of hands-on interactive and best practices. Then I wanted to mention, for those of you who don't know about ESIG, the way we work is through working groups and task forces. And we've got a number of working groups that you can see in the kind of blue bar above here. And then all those boxes are task forces or project teams that are doing work. And as an ESIG member, you can join any of these working groups or task forces and participate in this work. And I wanted to ask group and task force and project team leads, could you just stand up so we can see who you are? So Justin, that means you, and and other folks who, even if you completed one, like Julieta and Carlo, who've recently completed their reports, you guys just stand up. So these are some of the folks. I wanted to first give this round of a round of applause to these folks. These are some of the folks that have been herding cats and working to synthesize what we know in industry, what are the best practices, what are some of the leading methodologies in different areas. And I really wanted to thank them for their dedication. And some of the work that has come out, this is what's come out this year alone. Reports on everything from market design to integrated planning to grid enhancing technologies to testing performance of grid forming resources. And in the process are 4 more reports that are going to be published really soon this year: stress testing for resilience, integrating transmission silos planning, EV load forecasting, and net zero electricity planning. So thanks to all the folks who have been part of these and contributed. And now I wanted to just go through this week's agenda. So we had a great tutorial this morning. Thanks to Matt Richwine, to Deepak, to Julia on system needs and services. Thank you to Jason again. That was a great keynote and a nice introduction to PJM and some of the issues going on out here in the East. We have a plenary on grid events, as I mentioned. And then at 6:30, there's a meet and greet at Victory Brewing Company. If you're interested in joining this, please see Lacey to sign up. So tomorrow, breakfast starts at 7, the meeting starts at 8, and we'll be talking about everything from clean, firm capacity to operational issues and tools for the control room, accelerating transmission, AI applications in the power system, resource adequacy, wide area resource adequacy assessments, reforming interconnection queue processes, capacity accreditation with the evolving resource mix, and integrated planning with DERs. As Mark mentioned at 5:30, we have the student and young professionals networking reception. And thank you, shout out to Professor Ben Hobbs, who is the keynote speaker for that. And then at 6:30, we have a main reception. And then on Wednesday, again, breakfast at 7, we start at 8. We'll be talking about flexibility solutions and distribution systems with a focus on what's going on in Europe and Canada, where there's quite a lot of innovation happening. We'll talk about real world deployments with grid forming inverters. We've got a finance and investment session. This is the first time we're actually doing this kind of a session. We want to try and link the bankers and the investors to those of us who are working on things like market design and how do we design markets so that we can finance the infrastructure for things like long duration storage or transmission. We'll be talking about in the loop testing for model validation, collaborative approaches to planning, kind of bridging regulators and utilities ISOs, and then technical challenges with large loads. And then we'll have a closing fireside chat on the future of demand flexibility. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I think the time is ripe for demand flexibility to really start unleashing its potential, especially as it's difficult to build things right now. We need to lean on demand flexibility as much as possible. And then on Thursday, if you're a member or if you're interested in being a member and you want to see what it's like, talk to Lacey and Ryan outside about registering for Thursday. This is when the working groups meet. And this is when, if you have an idea of what we ought to work on as a group, come to these meetings, propose what you think we should work on next. Come and give us your ideas. So the reliability, system operation, market design, system planning working group will meet first thing in the morning, followed by the DER working group. And then we had that large loads workshop, like I mentioned earlier. That day is going to focus on flexibility, load forecasting, and transmission planning. And then we also have a collaboration with the EPICS research and collaboration. So again, Professor Ben Hobbs, I don't know if Yuri is here, and I think Mark O'Malley is going to be here later, and Pierre Luigi maybe. The EPICS folks are going to have their workshop all day Thursday and Friday morning. So come and give your input to research organizations on what kind of research you think needs to be happening to help support industry. And then finally, I wanted to welcome our international participants. Can you stand up if you are an international participant, if you came in from overseas or Canada? Okay, so we wanted to give you a special welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, for taking the time to travel here and to share your experiences and your knowledge. And so for those of you, reach out to some of our international guests and help introduce them to ESIG and share what you're working on. Oh, and also, I forgot to mention, welcome to those from the great nation of Texas. So I don't know how many Texans we've got, but I'm sure there are some. So welcome to you as well. And with that, I think my time is up and we're going to transition over to the open and plenary. Thank you very much.